Welcome to the Green Hell. In the heart of the Guyana rainforest, it's over 30 degrees. The humidity level is close to 80%. And when you're a beginner, almost anything can hurt or kill you. In short, it's not really the kind of place where you'd immediately think of settling down to study the brain. And yet, as you may have guessed, today I'd like to tell you about one of the craziest scientific experiments ever conducted. An exploration expedition aiming to better understand human adaptability to extreme climate conditions. We were fortunate to observe this experiment from the inside for several days. But to really explain what I'm doing in this mess, we'll need to go back a bit. This is Clot, and in life, he's used to one thing: carrying out research projects that seem way too crazy on paper to actually be done in real life. In 2016, this scientific explorer crossed alone and completely independently the 4 most extreme environments found on our planet. He successively traveled through a scorching desert in Iran, the marine channels of Patagonia, the humid tropical rainforest in Brazil, and the biting cold of Siberia. He subjected his body to particularly hostile variations in humidity and temperature, going in just a few weeks from plus 60 degrees Celsius in the shade to minus 100 degrees Celsius, and from humidity levels close to 0 to sometimes 100%. And during each of these expeditions, he subjected himself to a whole series of tests in order to try to understand the deep impacts that the drastic changes imposed by these extreme and radical environments have on metabolism and the brain. From these journeys, he came back with his mind full of memories, but also with one certainty. It is possible to conduct this type of experiment on a larger scale to bring back more data. Because to understand what happens in our minds when we are faced with situations that overwhelm us, when facing challenges, we need a large amount of evidence. And now, more than 6 years after the idea first came to him, Christian and his team have gathered about 20 volunteers ready to dive into the heart of extremes. In their everyday lives, when they're not immersing themselves in hellish conditions on the other side of the world, they are nurses, engineers, doctors, psychologists, or even sailors. And all of them, without exception, are getting ready to take their turn successively crossing some of the most hostile environments on our planet. Starting with the French Guianese Amazon, where for over a month they will venture deep inside, traveling up the rivers by raft, making their way through the rainforest on foot, and even, in exceptional cases, swimming. Clearly they weren't simply dropped here. First of all, like behind any fully autonomous mission, there is obviously some insane logistics involved. Friction is beautiful. And then, they spent almost a week in French Guiana, taking a survival training course in a tropical environment with the Foreign Legion. They learned how to find their way, to take care of each other in case one of them got seriously injured, and also how to identify dangerous species.
Come on, get up! Watch out for mudslides.
Or even how to start a fire when you don't have a lighter anymore. The goal of this training wasn't to make them experts in this environment, but simply to teach them the basics to get by in this absolutely bewildering setting, as Christian explains to us.
Every environment has unique constraints. That's why we chose them. Because they impact either general physiology or cognition differently. We chose this forest because, to me, it's the place where people will be the most disturbed at first. That is, they're going to enter a territory where, at first, they won't understand anything. That is, all this teeming life moves in every direction.
It must be said that this environment, when it's unfamiliar to you, is extremely intimidating. Already here, physical discomfort is constant. The humidity level is through the roof and everything is constantly soaked. Humidity seeps in everywhere, whether it comes from our own sweat, from the simple condensation of air that's already almost saturated with water, or most of all from the sky, where the downpours that fall regularly leave little respite. Sometimes it feels like we're moving through a cloud that's settled over the forest. And then, in this already disorienting world, there's also a strange feeling of oppression. Because it's both the great outdoors, but at the same time, at ground level, within just a few dozen meters, the visual horizon is completely blocked. So you always have to keep others within sight and earshot. Because if you move away from the group, you can quickly get lost, swallowed up by a forest where landmarks are almost non-existent. In this closed open world, moving forward on foot means pushing through an atmosphere so dense it feels like you could cut it with a knife. And above all, every meter gained comes at a high price in effort, hacking through the vegetation with big swings of the machete. That's what we call blazing a trail. And even though the forest is absolutely immense, you still have to weave your way through it, between fallen tree trunks, hills, and valleys. Because contrary to what aerial views might suggest, on the ground, a straight line remains an unattainable ideal. And here, you can only really make progress by zigzagging between obstacles, constantly checking that you haven't changed your direction without realizing it. So that when moving on foot through this dense and cramped territory, you rarely cover more than 2 to 3 kilometers a day. That's why the team tries to move forward by raft on the rivers as often as possible. And then, beyond these difficulties, there is above all, in this environment where life overflows everywhere, the ever-present danger, or rather the idea we have of it, which tirelessly, snake, repeats itself like a mantra in our heads, reminding us of the potential presence of all those creatures we really don't want to run into. And then we find ourselves moving forward with exaggerated movements, snake, to make noise, to signal our presence, and thus give time to any hypothetical creatures and other arachnids that might make you regret being born to scurry away. How do I know that this branch I'm hacking at with my machete isn't hiding a wasp nest? That this vine isn't being crawled on by bullet ants? Whose venom is rated on the Schmidt scale, which measures insect sting pain from 1 to 4 as 4+. And in terms of sensation, it's described as pure, intense, and brilliant pain. Here, basically, the main rule to follow to minimize the chances of unexpected encounters can be summed up in 2 lines. Leave nothing on the ground, touch nothing. It's a rule we follow meticulously every evening when we set up camp. Everyone has to find 2 trees sturdy enough to hang their hammock, and, with some hard machete work, clear a few square meters on the ground to spot any unwanted crawling creatures that might come through. Definitely, this humid tropical forest is essentially the land of constant vigilance and imagined dangers, which most of the time never actually happen. Like the bite of this neurotoxic snake, the fer de lance, which, to use the colorful terms our Legion instructor used to describe its consequences, immediately results in a mission failure. A bite that often leads straight to certain death. By the way, strangely enough, beyond the fear of crawling creatures and other delightful diseases transmitted by the bites of various small arthropods or parasites, which are just as dangerous as those from snakes, if not more so. The greatest threat in this environment has nothing to do with the animal world. It doesn't crawl on the ground, but occasionally comes from the sky, where dead standing trees can fall from their full height. Bending under the weight of water and other plants clinging to them, they can, when collapsing, bring down other trees with them, to the point of causing entire sections of forest to fall. And this feeling of an unidentified, teeming excess of life all around you is even more intense at night. Because when the sun sets, a symphony of sounds rises up. The alertness of your senses and the power of your imagination rise even higher. And suddenly, from the now precarious shelter that your hammock seems to provide, you start to hear the distant growl of jaguars and the howls of unknown animals. Here, crouched in the dark, I imagine the presence of 20,000 eyes beneath the foliage. Then, in the early morning, after realizing that these encounters that never seem to happen sometimes end up occurring,
While clearing up, I saw a snake hidden under the fire. And obviously I scared it. It tried to latch onto my leg. In the end, more scared than hurt, the snake was actually pretty.
it's time to take everything apart, reinflate the rafts, and keep going, heading deeper and deeper up the river. I wouldn't be able to stay in the forest long enough for my mind to learn how to turn down the volume on the dangers I couldn't control. But as I watch the banks fade away and the tree canopy pass by, I wonder if this environment isn't less dangerous than it is beautiful. Because despite all these dangers, this Amazonian forest, as stifling and overwhelming as it may be, is also rich with an incredibly diverse biodiversity for those who take the time to look. Here, the ability to marvel might be one of the most powerful energies to make you want to keep moving forward, as Christian explains to me.
There are a lot of misconceptions about the forest. I think it's the environment that brings the most misconceptions about danger, about animals, about risks. And everything we hear, all the people who talk to us, it's only to tell us about the risks and the problems. People never say, wow, you'll see monkeys and plants in the forest. Instead, they always warn, oh no, there are parasites. And that's true. So people go in, we all go in with a pretty strong sense of apprehension, so it's psychological. If we want to understand adaptation, we fundamentally need to understand emotion, wonder, what makes me want to fight and overcome something. And it's not about withdrawing, on the contrary, it's about giving ourselves such powerful reasons. And powerful reasons are love, desire, wonder, things that touch our hearts. I hope that people will find that sense of wonder in this environment. I hope that at some point they'll stop seeing the difficulties, the violence, or the fear, and that they'll start to notice more closely, hey look, there's a bird in the tree, there's that flower we hadn't seen yet. Gradually they tell themselves this environment can benefit them too.
When evening comes, after landing on another shore, you have to start all over again. Enter the forest, find a new spot for the camp, clear the land, settle in. And once again, carry out a series of scientific tests.
This is the moment of truth. Are you ready, little one? Let it snap.
After the water?
After that, we'll wash up before eating. That way we'll be a little clean.
Honestly, I'm starting to
Smell the...
jungle rot.
That's disgusting.
Because the main goal of this exploration mission is to try to better understand how we react when faced with situations that are beyond us. When doubts, fears, and uncertainties take over. When constantly stimulated, overwhelmed from all sides by unfamiliar information, the brain, destabilized, goes into overload mode. Advancing in this grueling environment, constantly suffering from the heat and humidity. The participants in this crazy experiment, with their 5 senses, constantly on alert in a world they barely know, are like data sponges. Data that will feed the 50 or so researchers involved in this project and will be compared with the large amount already collected during extensive experiments they conducted before leaving, and will allow us to learn more about the changes in cognitive, physiological, and psychological abilities that occur within us under adaptation conditions.
So how much?
46.
Wow! Mon Dieu!
In everyday life, it's impossible to put sensors on people at the exact moment when a major event impacts their lives, when a big shift happens. And that's for obvious ethical reasons.
First question, what were your ideas, thoughts and feelings when setting up the first camp in the forest yesterday? I'm going to have to be very meticulous with every move I make, every item I take out. So it's not going to be easy, but hey, that's what we're here for. And since we're all in the same boat, I think we're going to help each other a lot.
And then, by traveling through these isolated territories in conditions that can only be described as disconcerting, these adventurers are moving their bodies through space, but also a bit through time. Because these conditions that take them out of their ordinary lives and may seem exceptionally inhospitable will be the norm in a relatively near future. Regularly the norm in many regions of the world. Consider that today, in the Ganges and Indus River basins, 15% of the inhabitants already regularly experience extremely harsh climatic conditions for living beings, with temperatures of 35 degrees Celsius and humidity levels of 70%. It is believed that this proportion of affected people could rise to 75% by the end of the century if greenhouse gas emission trends continue at the same rate. In the south of France, by 2050 many major cities will experience several months each year of this radically new type of climate. Thus, studying the resilience of a group of people, their strengths and weaknesses, in the face of these often abrupt changes in climate and environment, allows us to anticipate and also help those who may face them in the future. In the end, we only stayed with them for 8 days. They continued on for nearly 40 days, completely self-sufficient, through the winding waterways and the neural networks of their brains. And as this video is being released, this exciting and perilous scientific adventure is about to begin again. To continue with a journey in an environment that is 60 degrees different from the one where we left them. To get a few visual glimpses of this second mission, which will take them across Lapland on foot, sleeping outside sometimes in -30 degrees, you can follow me on Insta. I'll try to share some behind-the-scenes moments from this crazy adventure that I'll be taking part in a little bit. Hoping to see you there and come back alive. If you want to learn more about deep climate, I've put a link to a fascinating interview with Christian below the video, where I also explain the project in more detail. And a big thank you to Thibaut, who is often behind the camera. Go check out his YouTube channel, there are some real documentary gems he has made. I'll add the link below and at the end of the video. With that, I hope to see you there and return safely.
I didn't see any huge pincers, unfortunately. Here, they're not scorpions. So I wondered, what is it? Actually, I felt a sting and thought, what is this thing? So I lifted up my pants. If you feel like it's just a wasp sting, just check the gel like usual. Keep me updated. For now, just take it easy today, alright? We're going to show you around the camp so you can see what it looks like. Well, actually, when it rains?